So when we get the content from a client or to build a website, we have all kinds of glyphs of text and content that we need to group together. So this represents kind of all of the material that comes in, and we will order it in sort of batches that are similar to each other. So we want to keep things in a hierarchy of different kind of size and not 100 kind of size, but like the strong one and a medium and so like go down a little bit so it makes it clear to a user how your hierarchy is structured on a website. There's a law of proximity that things that are closer together seem to belong together. So in this case, you could see the second, which could be a headline, is kind of right in between the two paragraphs. So it could unconsciously confuse somebody. If you move it closer to the actual paragraph, it makes it clear that this is the headline for that paragraph. So this, for example, looks better, has a clear, bold headline, and then the paragraph underneath of it. This is confusing. There's like a headline or who's speaking in between the two paragraphs, so I'm not really quite sure who's speaking in that moment. This I see it quite often that the headlines, the line spacing, you want to keep them closer together so they don't look like really actually separate lines or separate parts. Like in this example, it's a bad example because the headlines and the paragraph text have the same line spacing between, like the space between each of the lines. It's nicer to have the headlines as one block and more tight and closer together. Two things stand out on a page. We feel that they are connected somehow. If there's one that stands out, you can make that a very important element because it's the only one that stands out. We can only keep a very few items in our short-term memory. Other animals can actually do much more. Even chimpanzees can remember a lot more in their short-term memory of items to put them in order. But I think we as humans are kind of trained to only like sort of eliminate all of the unimportant information because we're overwhelmed with too much information. So we cannot actually remember in our short-term memory a very long line of items. Yeah, if you offer people different ways to solve the problem, they will always choose the easiest way to get to the end. So if you have a plan, if you have several plans and one seems to be much more complicated than the other, all the users will choose the easier version. This comes up a lot for people that put up websites and new platforms, that 80% of your 20% of your users will actually use 80% of the bandwidth of the site. Those will be the target of users, and the rest of the 80% that are not even using those functions, you can sort of not disregard them, but you're working towards the 20% that actually really use your product. And that's true to a lot, like they say, I'm sure it's probably not exactly 20/80, but they use this number quite often in marketing to target those 20% that are the power users. We remember the last thing of a show. So if that's the bang, then that's what we remember. Too many options will confuse you. That's called the Hicks Law. So if you can eliminate some of the steps in between and make it easier for someone to purchase your product, for example, they already have all their contact information in their profile or their payment options, and they have just a one-click purchasing option, that will make it so easy, they're much more likely to buy your product. There's also remember if there are many items, remember the first and the last. So if you make in your portfolio, for example, you should make the first example the best and the last the best, and then go back and forth into deeper into the center of it. But we remember the first and the very last of a chain. This is a more of a visual law, that if these dots are the same rule, but one is surrounded by very large items and one is surrounded by very small items, so our relation thinks that the one on the left is smaller because it's just an optical illusion. So when you design a website, you could use even a smaller button or size button, but if you give it more white space around, it will make it more important and draw more attention to itself and will actually look bigger. And this is another effect that we use for onboarding quite a lot. If you have an onboarding process, you want to get the first steps quite easy so people know that they're moving along. And at the very last step, you could pack in a little bit more condensed information because at that point, our will to finish it up is going to be overwhelming. Instead, if you have one long form, then everyone's going to give up right away because they don't think that they can ever finish this.